I'm Jessica, 29, and last Thursday during what was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner, my mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're the most useless child we have." The words hit like a slap across the face, especially considering I had been quietly funding their entire lifestyle for 4 years. What Mom didn't know was that I had already discovered the family group chat called Jessica's Money Tree, where they openly mocked my generosity while planning how to extract even more cash from me. That night, I made a decision that would shake our family to its core. I closed the bank of Jessica permanently. But the revenge that followed was sweeter than anything I could have planned, and the karma they faced was absolutely perfect. Before we dive into this story of financial manipulation and ultimate family justice, I need your predictions. What do you think happened when a family's secret ATM suddenly shut down? Did they panic, beg, or try to guilt-trip me back into funding their lives? Drop your theories in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever been taken advantage of by your own family, and make sure to subscribe because this tale of financial revenge and sweet justice will show you exactly what happens when kindness gets weaponized against you. Trust me, the ending will leave you cheering for boundaries and self-respect. Growing up as the middle child between my older brother Ryan and younger sister Chloe, I learned early that money was love in the Matthews household. When I got my first job at 16, scooping ice cream at the local Dairy Queen, my parents were thrilled, not because I was developing work ethic, but because it meant I could contribute to the family in ways my siblings couldn't yet. Jessica's always been our responsible one, Mom would tell neighbors, beaming with pride as I handed over my entire paycheck to help with groceries and utilities. She understands that family comes first. What she didn't mention was that Ryan, 18 at the time, spent his days playing video games and had never held a job, while 14-year-old Chloe received a generous allowance for doing absolutely nothing around the house. The pattern continued through high school and college. While my siblings were encouraged to focus on their studies and social lives, I worked multiple jobs to pay for my own education and still sent money home monthly. I told myself it was temporary, just until Dad's construction business got back on its feet, just until Ryan found his direction, just until Chloe graduated high school. After college, I landed a marketing position at a tech company in Austin, Texas. The salary was excellent, especially for someone fresh out of university, and I was finally earning enough to live comfortably while still helping my family back home in Ohio. The requests started small and reasonable. Help with Mom's car repair, assistance with Ryan's community college tuition, money for Chloe's prom dress. But over 4 years, these small favors had grown into a comprehensive financial support system that I had somehow become solely responsible for maintaining. I was paying their mortgage, $2,400 monthly, covering all utilities, $300 to $400 per month, funding groceries, $600 monthly, and handling what seemed like an endless stream of emergencies that required immediate financial intervention. Ryan, now 26, had never held a steady job for more than 3 months. He lived in my parents' basement, spending his days day trading cryptocurrency with money I provided and playing online games with equipment I had purchased. When his trading inevitably lost money, I was expected to cover the losses. When his gaming setup needed upgrades, I was the one who received the links to expensive components with subtle hints about upcoming birthdays. Chloe, 24, had graduated college debt-free thanks to my contributions to her tuition and living expenses. Instead of finding employment, she had moved back home to figure out her passion, while working part-time at a boutique clothing store. Her paycheck covered her social life and shopping habits, while I covered everything else she needed to maintain her lifestyle. Mom and Dad had restructured their entire financial existence around my contributions. Dad's construction business was legitimately struggling due to his age and increased competition from larger companies, but instead of downsizing their lifestyle or finding alternative income sources, they had simply shifted their expenses to me. Mom hadn't worked outside the home in over a decade, claiming she was too old to start over, at 53. The most painful part wasn't the money itself. It was the expectation that had developed around my role as the family's financial safety net. When I mentioned feeling overwhelmed by the constant requests, I was reminded of how much the family had invested in me over the years. When I suggested that Ryan or Chloe might contribute to household expenses, I was told I was being selfish and forgetting where I came from. Every family gathering included subtle references to their financial struggles and my comparative wealth. "Must be nice to live in Texas with all that tech money," Ryan would say with obvious resentment. "Some of us aren't lucky enough to have fancy college degrees and six-figure salaries." The implication was always clear. My success was somehow unearned luck rather than the result of years of hard work and sacrifice. The guilt-tripping was masterful and constant. Mom had perfected the art of making me feel responsible for their problems without directly asking for help. She would call to chat and casually mention that the electric bill was higher than expected, that Dad was worried about making the mortgage payment, or that Chloe was so stressed about not being able to afford the things her friends had. These conversations always ended the same way, with me offering to help and Mom accepting with grateful tears and promises that it was just temporary and they would pay me back as soon as things turned around. But things never turned around because there was no incentive for them to change as long as I was willing to subsidize their choices. I had become what financial experts call an enabler, someone whose well-intentioned help actually prevents the recipients from developing independence and problem-solving skills. But I didn't realize the extent of the dysfunction until I discovered how they really felt about my generosity. The wake-up call came in the form of a text message that wasn't meant for me. Chloe had been trying to send a screenshot to the family group chat, but accidentally sent it to me instead. The screenshot was of her bank account showing a $500 balance with the caption, "Time to hit up the Jessica ATM again, LOL." Curious and hurt, I asked her what the Jessica ATM comment meant. She tried to laugh it off, claiming it was just a joke, but something in her tone made me suspicious. That night, I did something I had never done before. I asked my tech-savvy friend Marcus to help me figure out if there were any family group chats that I wasn't included in. What we discovered was worse than I could have imagined. There was indeed a group chat called Jessica's Money Tree that included Mom, Dad, Ryan, and Chloe. 4 years of messages revealed the heartbreaking truth about how my family really saw me and my contributions to their lives. The messages ranged from strategic planning. "Jessica seemed stressed last time. Let's wait a week before asking for the AC repair money," to outright mockery. "She's so gullible. She actually believes Dad is looking for work," to cold calculation. "If we play this right, we can probably get her to pay for Chloe's car and the vacation." Reading those messages was like discovering that people I loved and trusted had been running a long-term con game with me as the mark. Every expression of gratitude had been fake. Every promise to pay me back had been a lie. Every family dinner where they celebrated my success was actually them celebrating their access to my bank account. But the message that finally broke me was from Mom, sent just 2 weeks before our fateful family dinner. "Jessica is getting too comfortable saying no to requests. We need to make her feel more guilty about having so much when we have so little. Maybe if we make her feel bad enough about her selfishness, she'll stop questioning what we need the money for." That's when I realized I wasn't their daughter or their sister. I was their business plan. And it was time to shut down the business permanently. The Jessica's Money Tree group chat contained 4 years of evidence that completely reframed every interaction I had with my family. As I scrolled through hundreds of messages with Marcus looking over my shoulder, the scope of their deception became clear. This wasn't just casual conversation about family finances. It was a coordinated strategy to maximize their extraction of money from me while minimizing my resistance to their requests. The earliest messages dated back to when I first started my job in Austin. "Jessica's making good money now," Dad had written. "We need to be smart about this. Can't ask for too much too fast or she'll get suspicious." Mom had replied, "I'll start with small stuff. Car troubles, unexpected bills. Build up to the bigger requests gradually." They had literally planned my financial exploitation from day one of my career success. The strategic nature of their manipulation was breathtaking. They coordinated their requests to avoid overlap, timed their emergencies for maximum emotional impact, and even assigned roles to different family members based on what would be most effective with me. Ryan should ask for the gaming computer, one message read. Jessica feels guilty about his depression, and she'll pay to make him happy. I'll handle the mortgage stuff because she trusts me with big financial decisions. Chloe can work on her for fun money. Jessica wants to be the cool older sister who helps with social stuff. They had analyzed my psychological weaknesses and weaponized them against me with clinical precision. My desire to be helpful, my guilt about being more financially successful, my love for my family. All of it had been carefully cataloged and used to manipulate me into funding their lifestyle. But the most hurtful messages were the ones where they mocked my generosity and gullibility. She actually believes Dad is looking for work, Chloe had written, followed by crying laughing emojis. He hasn't sent out a resume in 2 years. Ryan had replied, why would he? Jessica pays for everything anyway. There were screenshots of fake job applications that Dad had created to show me when I asked about his employment search. There were photos of purchases they had made with my money, accompanied by captions like, thanks, Jessica, and living our best life on Jess's dime. There were even memes about me being their personal ATM and jokes about how I was too stupid to realize we're using her. The financial tracking was meticulous. Mom kept spreadsheets documenting how much money they had received from me, what stories had been most effective in getting me to send money, and projections for future requests based on my salary and spending patterns. According to their records, I had sent them $127,400 over 4 years. The breakdown was staggering. $115,200 in regular monthly support, plus $12,200 in emergency funds for various crises that I now realized had been largely fabricated or exaggerated. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was discovering how they really felt about me as a person. In their private conversations, I wasn't their accomplished daughter or successful sister. I was their cash cow, their golden goose, their useful idiot. The best part about Jessica is that she never asks for anything back, Dad had written. She just gives and feels grateful that we let her help. It's actually kind of pathetic. Mom had responded, as long as she stays single and focused on her career, we're set. If she ever gets married or has kids, we might lose our funding source. The cruelty was casual and constant. They made fun of my apartment, my dating life, my work stress, and my personality quirks. When I had been excited about a promotion, they had mocked my enthusiasm in the chat while congratulating me to my face. When I had been struggling with anxiety, they had joked about how my mental problems made me easier to manipulate. Jessica called crying about work stress again. Ryan had written after one particularly difficult week when I had reached out for emotional support. I pretended to care for like 10 minutes and then steered the conversation toward the money I need for my trading account. She's so desperate for family connection that she'll pay for the privilege of having someone listen to her problems. Reading that message felt like a physical blow. I had called Ryan during one of the lowest points of my professional life, genuinely needing support from someone I trusted, and he had seen it as an opportunity to extract money while providing fake emotional support. The group chat also revealed that they had been sharing details about my personal life with extended family members, not out of genuine concern or pride, but to maintain their image as the supportive family of a successful daughter. They had been taking credit for my achievements while privately mocking the very success they claimed to be proud of. Cousin Amy was asking about Jessica's promotion. Mom had written, I told her we raised her with strong work ethics and family values. Didn't mention that her family values mainly consist of sending us money every month. Dad had replied, as long as the relatives think we're good parents, that's what matters. Jessica's success makes us look good even if she's actually kind of a weirdo. The weirdo comment was particularly painful because it referenced my introversion and preference for small gatherings over large family events. I had always felt slightly out of place at extended family gatherings, but I had assumed it was just my personality. Now I realized my own nuclear family had been characterizing me as strange and antisocial to relatives who barely knew me. But perhaps the most devastating discovery was their contingency planning for what would happen if I ever stopped sending money. They had actually discussed strategies for manipulating me back into compliance, including fake medical emergencies, threats of homelessness, and emotional blackmail involving family dissolution. If Jessica ever tries to cut us off, Mom had written, we can always play the disappointed parents card. Tell her she's abandoning family, that we sacrificed everything for her education, that she's being selfish and ungrateful. She's got enough guilt and people-pleasing tendencies that she'll probably cave within a week. The clinical calculation of it was breathtaking. They had identified my psychological vulnerabilities and developed detailed plans for exploiting them. They weren't just taking my money. They were systematically undermining my emotional well-being to ensure continued access to my financial resources. As I finished reading through 4 years of messages, I felt something I had never experienced before: complete clarity about my relationship with my family. The confusion, guilt, and self-doubt that had plagued me for years suddenly made perfect sense. I hadn't been imagining their coldness or misinterpreting their behavior. I had been living as the victim of a long-term financial exploitation scheme run by the people who were supposed to love and support me. But I also felt something else: rage. Pure, cold rage at the people who had systematically betrayed my trust, exploited my generosity, and mocked my kindness while accepting my financial support. They had turned my love for them into a weapon against me, and they had done it with such calculated precision that I wondered if they were even capable of genuine human emotion. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront them about the group chat immediately. Instead, I was going to give them exactly what they had been planning for: a test of their contingency strategies. I was going to cut off their funding and see how quickly they revealed their true colors when the money stopped flowing. But first, I wanted to hear them say out loud what they had been saying in private for 4 years. I wanted to give them the opportunity to show me who they really were, not who they pretended to be when they needed something from me. The stage was set for the most honest conversation my family had ever had, even if they didn't know it yet. I spent 2 weeks planning my approach after discovering the group chat. Unlike the impulsive confrontations you see in movies, I wanted this to be methodical and strategic. I had learned from the best. After all, my own family had been running a long-term psychological manipulation campaign against me for 4 years. It was time to apply some of their own tactics. First, I documented everything. I took screenshots of every message in the Jessica's Money Tree chat, organized them chronologically, and created a comprehensive file showing the pattern of deception and manipulation. I also pulled together bank statements showing every transfer I had made to my family, creating a clear financial picture of how much money they had extracted from me over the years. When I finished the document, it was 47 pages long. Next, I consulted with a family law attorney in Austin, not because I planned to sue them, but because I wanted to understand my legal position. Could they claim I owed them continued support? Did I have any recourse for the money they had obtained through deception? The attorney assured me that I had no legal obligation to continue supporting adult family members and that I could stop payments immediately without any legal consequences. Finally, I planned my test. I decided to visit home for a family dinner and create a situation that would reveal their true attitudes toward me without the filter of financial need. I wanted to see how they treated me when they thought I might not be useful to them anymore. I called Mom on a Tuesday afternoon, timing the call for when I knew she would be home alone and likely to be honest about family finances, if prompted correctly. "Hi, Mom. I was thinking about coming home for dinner this weekend. Are you guys free Saturday?" "Oh, honey, that would be wonderful. We haven't seen you in months." Her voice carried the warm, maternal tone she used when she wanted something from me, but I could hear the calculation underneath it now. "Great. Actually, Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something when I'm there. I've been doing some financial planning, and I might need to make some changes to how I've been helping out the family. There was a brief pause, just long enough for me to know she was processing the potential threat to their income stream. What kind of changes, sweetheart? Nothing dramatic, just some adjustments based on my own goals and budget. We can talk about it when I'm there. Of course, honey. You know we appreciate everything you do for us, and we want what's best for you too. The lie came so smoothly that I wondered if she even remembered what the truth looked like anymore. But I could already imagine the emergency family meeting that would happen as soon as we hung up, the frantic messages in the group chat about how to handle this potential crisis. I arrived at the family home Saturday evening to find everyone gathered for dinner, an unusual occurrence since Ryan typically avoided family meals and Chloe usually had social plans on weekends. Their presence confirmed that Mom had indeed called an emergency meeting to strategize their response to my vague threats about financial changes. The dinner conversation was strained and artificial, with everyone clearly focused on the elephant in the room, but trying to act normal. Mom had made my favorite meal, another manipulation tactic I recognized now that I understood their methods. Dad was being unusually attentive, asking about my work and apartment with fake interest. Ryan was actually wearing clean clothes and participating in conversation instead of staring at his phone. Chloe was the most transparent in her anxiety, checking her phone constantly and jumping whenever it buzzed. I suspected she was coordinating with someone in real time, possibly getting coaching on what to say or due to maintain their access to my money. After dinner, as we sat in the living room for what Mom called family time, I decided to begin my test. So, I wanted to talk to you guys about some changes I'm considering. I began, keeping my tone casual and non-threatening. The room went completely silent. Even Ryan looked up from his phone. I've been thinking about my long-term financial goals, and I might need to reduce some of my monthly expenses so I can save more for my own future. Things like retirement, maybe buying a house, possibly going back to school for an MBA. Dad nodded slowly, but I could see the panic in his eyes. That sounds very responsible, Jess. What kind of time frame are you thinking about? Well, I'd probably need to start making changes pretty soon. Maybe beginning next month. The family exchanged glances, quick, meaningful looks that confirmed they had definitely discussed this scenario in advance. Honey, Mom said, her voice taking on the sweetly reasonable tone she used when she was about to launch a guilt campaign, we completely understand that you need to plan for your future. We've always been so proud of how responsible you are with money. I waited, knowing there was more coming. But you know how much we depend on your help right now. Dad's still looking for steady work, and Chloe is just getting started in her career. Maybe we could work together to find a gradual transition plan that works for everyone. There it was, the first manipulation attempt. Frame my financial independence as something that required their approval and input, make it seem like a collaborative family decision rather than my individual choice. What kind of transition did you have in mind? I asked, genuinely curious about how they would try to maintain their income while appearing supportive of my goals. Ryan spoke up for the first time, his voice carrying an edge of desperation he was trying to hide. I mean, some of the stuff you help with is pretty essential, Jess. Like, the mortgage and utilities aren't really optional expenses. That's true, I acknowledged. Those are definitely essential for you guys. How are you planning to handle those expenses before I started helping out? The question hung in the air like a challenge. They had never planned to handle those expenses themselves. They had simply transferred responsibility to me and built their entire lifestyle around my contributions. Dad tried to regain control of the conversation. Jessica, I think you might be forgetting how much this family has invested in you over the years. We paid for your education, supported you through college, helped you get started in your career. This isn't just charity we're asking for, it's family mutual support. This was the argument I had been expecting, the one that had worked on me for years. The idea that my success was somehow a family asset rather than my individual achievement, that my financial independence created an obligation to support family members who had made different choices. But now, armed with knowledge of their true feelings and 4 years of evidence showing their deception, the argument felt hollow and manipulative rather than compelling. You're absolutely right, Dad. Family should be mutual support. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. I pulled out my phone and pretended to check my notes, building suspense while watching their faces. I've been thinking about what mutual support actually means, and I realized I might have been doing this wrong. Instead of just sending money, maybe I should be helping you guys develop long-term financial independence. Teach a man to fish instead of giving him fish. The panic in the room was palpable now. This was clearly not the direction they had hoped the conversation would go. What exactly are you suggesting? Mom asked, her voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. Well, for example, Ryan, you're 26 and living rent-free with no real job responsibilities. Maybe instead of me funding your lifestyle, I could help you create a resume and find employment that would let you contribute to household expenses. Ryan's face flushed red. I'm working on my trading, Jess. That's basically a full-time job, and it has huge potential for. How much money have you made trading this year? I interrupted. It's not about this year. It's about building long-term strategies. So you've lost money. It's an investment in learning. Ryan, I've been funding your learning for 4 years. At some point, shouldn't there be some actual results? The room fell silent again. I had never challenged Ryan's lifestyle choices directly before, had never questioned the financial logic of supporting someone who was actively losing the money I sent him. Chloe tried to redirect the conversation away from Ryan's failures. Jess, I think what we're all trying to say is that family sticks together. We're not just asking you to give us money. We're giving you the chance to be part of something bigger than yourself. The manipulation was so blatant, it was almost impressive. She was reframing their financial dependence as a gift they were giving me, the privilege of supporting them. That's an interesting way to look at it, Chloe. What am I getting out of this arrangement besides the satisfaction of helping family? You're getting love, support, gratitude. Am I, though? The question stopped her mid-sentence. For the first time in the conversation, someone had directly challenged the assumption that they were providing me with emotional value in exchange for financial support. What do you mean? Mom asked, her voice now clearly defensive. I mean, when was the last time any of you called me just to see how I was doing without needing money or having some kind of crisis I needed to solve? When was the last time you celebrated one of my achievements without immediately thinking about how it might benefit you financially? The silence was deafening. They couldn't answer the question because the honest answer was never. And they couldn't lie convincingly because I had 4 years of evidence showing their true priorities. That's when Mom delivered the line that would change everything forever. Jessica Marie Matthews, she said, her voice rising with frustration and anger. I cannot believe you would sit here and accuse your own family of using you. After everything we've done for you, after all the love and support we've given you over the years, this is how you repay us? By questioning our motives and making us feel like we're taking advantage of you. She paused, her face red with indignation, and then delivered the words that would finally set me free. You know what? Maybe we do rely on your help. Maybe we do need your financial support to maintain our lifestyle. But at least Ryan and Chloe contribute something to this family besides money. At least they're here, they're present, they're part of our lives in ways that matter. You're the most useless child we have. All you do is send money and then complain about it. If that's such a burden for you, then maybe you should just stop. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. She had finally said out loud what she had been saying in the group chat for years, but she had done it in a moment of anger rather than strategic manipulation. I felt something I had never experienced before, complete emotional clarity. The guilt, confusion, and self-doubt that had plagued me for years suddenly evaporated, replaced by a calm certainty about what I needed to do next. Okay, I said quietly. I'll stop. The word, Okay, seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the living room. For a moment, nobody moved or spoke. It was as if my calm acceptance of Mom's challenge had short-circuited their brains. They had expected me to argue, to defend myself, to back down from my position. They hadn't expected me to simply agree with their demand to stop helping them financially. Mom was the first to recover, her face shifting from anger to confusion. What do you mean? Okay? I mean exactly what you said. You told me to stop sending money if it's such a burden, so I'm going to stop. Effective immediately. I pulled out my phone and began opening my banking app. I can cancel the automatic transfers right now, actually. The panic that spread across the room was immediate and obvious. Dad leaned forward in his chair, his voice taking on a placating tone. Now, Jessica, let's not be hasty. Your mother was just upset. No, Dad, she was right. I am useless to this family except for my money, and apparently even that comes with too many strings attached. So let me solve everyone's problem by removing myself from the equation entirely. I had pulled up my bank's transfer screen and was methodically canceling every recurring payment I had set up for them. The mortgage assistance, utility payments, grocery allowance, Ryan's trading fund, Chloe's spending money. All of it disappeared with a few taps on my phone screen. There, I said, holding up my phone so they could see the screen. All automatic payments to this household have been canceled. The last transfers will process on Monday, and after that, you'll have complete financial independence. Isn't that what you wanted? Chloe was staring at my phone screen like it contained nuclear launch codes. Just wait. You can't just... Can't just what? I can't just stop being an ATM? I can't just take Mom's advice and stop being a burden on the family? I stood up and gathered my purse, preparing to leave. You guys have been very clear about what you think of me and my contributions. I'm just finally listening to what you've been trying to tell me. Ryan had gone completely pale. Jessica, you're overreacting. Mom didn't mean. Ryan, let me ask you something. How long do you think it will take for you to find a real job now that your funding has been cut off? A week? A month? Or will you finally admit that you've been using me as a safety net to avoid taking responsibility for your own life? The question hit him like a physical blow. For 4 years, I had been enabling his refusal to grow up, and he had become so comfortable with the arrangement that he had forgotten it wasn't sustainable forever. This is ridiculous, Dad said, standing up and trying to reassert his authority as the family patriarch. Jessica, sit back down. We need to talk about this rationally as a family. We just to talk about it as a family, Dad. And the family made it very clear that my only value is financial, and even that's more trouble than it's worth. So, I'm removing the trouble. I started walking toward the front door, but Mom jumped up and blocked my path. Jessica, stop. Please. You're being dramatic and hurtful, and this isn't solving anything. Mom, I'm being exactly as dramatic as you were when you called me the most useless child you have. The only difference is that I'm not asking you for money while I insult you. I didn't mean it that way. Yes, you did.
And you know what? You were probably right.
I have been useless as a daughter and a sister because I've been so focused on being a walking wallet that I never learned how to have actual relationships with any of you. The conversation was happening in the entryway now, with me trying to leave and the entire family forming a semicircle to block my exit. It would have been comical if it weren't so pathetic, for adults desperately trying to prevent their cash flow from walking out the door. Jessica, please, Chloe said, and for the first time her voice carried what sounded like genuine emotion instead of calculated manipulation. We love you. You're not useless. Mom was just. Chloe, when was the last time you called me to ask how I was doing without needing something from me? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. We both knew the answer was never. When was the last time any of you visited me in Austin? When was the last time you celebrated one of my achievements without immediately thinking about how it might benefit you? When was the last time you treated me like a person instead of a resource? The silence stretched uncomfortably long because they couldn't answer any of my questions honestly without admitting that our entire relationship had been transactional. Dad tried a different approach, appealing to my sense of family obligation. Jessica, we're your family. We raised you, we loved you, we supported your dreams. Doesn't that count for something? It absolutely counts for something, Dad. But you didn't raise me to be your personal ATM. You raised me to be independent and successful. So that's what I'm being, independent. From now on, you can love me and support my dreams without needing my bank account to make it possible. I finally managed to step around Mom and reach for the door handle. Look, I'm not cutting contact or anything dramatic like that. I'm just cutting the financial support. If you want to have a relationship with me that's based on something other than money, I'm completely open to that. But Jessica, Ryan said desperately, what are we supposed to do about the mortgage? The utilities? The bills? The question revealed everything about how they saw our relationship. Not once had he asked how I was feeling, whether I was hurt by Mom's words, or if there was a way to repair the emotional damage that had been done. His only concern was maintaining access to my money. The same thing millions of other families do, Ryan. You'll figure it out. Get jobs, reduce expenses, make hard choices. You know, all the things you would have had to do if you had never had a sister to exploit in the first place. I opened the door and stepped onto the front porch, breathing the cool evening air and feeling lighter than I had in years. Behind me, I could hear them arguing among themselves. Not about how to repair our relationship or address the hurt feelings, but about logistics. Who was going to pay which bills, how they were going to manage without my contributions, whether they could afford to keep the house. It was the most honest conversation our family had ever had because for the first time, they were talking about what actually mattered to them. The money. As I drove back to my hotel, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 4 years. Complete control over my own financial resources. No more calculating how much I could afford to send home while still paying my own bills. No more lying awake at night worrying about their latest crisis. No more guilt about wanting to spend my own money on my own priorities. I also felt something else. Anticipation. I knew that within hours, the Jessica's Money Tree group chat would be buzzing with frantic messages about damage control and contingency planning. They would realize that their cash flow had been cut off by someone who had finally called their bluff, and they would have to decide whether our relationship had any value beyond financial transactions. But I wasn't worried about their emergency planning sessions anymore. For the first time in years, their financial crisis was their problem to solve, not mine. The Bank of Jessica was officially closed, and I was finally free to discover who I was when I wasn't being defined by my usefulness to other people. The real test would come in the following days, when they realized that their usual manipulation tactics weren't going to restore their funding source, and they would have to decide whether they actually wanted a relationship with me or just access to my bank account. Based on 4 years of evidence, I was pretty sure I knew which choice they would make. The campaign to restore their funding began exactly 18 hours after I left their house. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Sunday morning with a call from Mom, followed by increasingly frantic voicemails from different family members throughout the day. By Sunday evening, I had received 12 phone calls, 23 text messages, and 4 emails, all focused on convincing me to restore their financial support. The messages followed a predictable pattern that revealed just how calculated their usual manipulation tactics had been. They started with apologies that weren't really apologies, moved to guilt-tripping about family obligations, escalated to veiled threats about consequences, and finally devolved into desperate bargaining attempts. Mom's first voicemail was a masterpiece of non-apology manipulation. Honey, I'm so sorry about last night. I was tired and stressed about money, and I said things I didn't mean. You know I love you and value everything you do for this family. Can we please talk about this rationally? I'm sure we can work something out that makes everyone happy. Notice what was missing from that message. Any acknowledgement of what she had actually said, any recognition of how her words had affected me, or any acceptance of responsibility for creating the situation. She was sorry I was upset, not sorry for what she had done to upset me. Ryan's approach was more direct but equally manipulative. Jess, this is insane. You can't just abandon your family because Mom said something stupid. We all say things we don't mean when we're stressed. But cutting off our income isn't going to solve anything. It's just going to create bigger problems for everyone. Be the bigger person here. The be the bigger person line was particularly galling because it suggested that restoring their funding would be the mature, responsible choice, while maintaining my financial boundaries was somehow petty and vindictive. Chloe tried emotional manipulation. Jessica, I'm really scared about what's going to happen to our family. Dad's been looking at apartments because he doesn't think they can afford the house payment. Mom's been crying all day. Ryan's talking about moving out west to live with his friend. Are you really okay with breaking up our family over one fight? The message was designed to make me feel responsible for the family's dissolution, as if their inability to fund their lifestyle without my support was somehow my fault rather than the natural consequence of their financial mismanagement. But the most revealing message came from Dad. Jessica, I've been thinking about this situation, and I want to make you an offer. What if we formalized our arrangement? You could be a silent partner in my construction business. We could draw up contracts, make this official, maybe even give you some tax benefits. This way it wouldn't feel like charity, it would be a legitimate business investment. This message showed that he still didn't understand the fundamental problem. He thought I was upset about the financial arrangement itself, not about being deceived and manipulated for years. He was trying to solve the wrong problem while completely ignoring the emotional betrayal that had motivated my decision. By Monday morning, when they realized I wasn't responding to any of their messages, the tone shifted dramatically. The apologies disappeared, replaced by accusations and threats that revealed their true feelings about my decision to prioritize my own financial independence. Jessica, this is ridiculous. Mom's Monday voicemail began, her voice tight with anger. She was no longer trying to hide. You're being selfish and vindictive, and you're hurting people who love you just to make a point. If you don't call me back by tonight, I'm going to assume you've decided to abandon your family completely. The threat was subtle but clear. Continue supporting us financially, or lose your family entirely. It was the same ultimatum that had kept me trapped in their manipulation cycle for years, but now I could see it for what it really was: emotional blackmail. Ryan's Monday message was even more direct. Jess, I just want you to know that if Mom and Dad lose the house because of this tantrum you're throwing, it's going to be your fault. They're too proud to declare bankruptcy, so they'll probably just try to struggle through until they can't make payments anymore. Is that really what you want? To make your own parents homeless because you got your feelings hurt? The message was a perfect example of their manipulation tactics. Reframe my financial independence as a tantrum, make me responsible for consequences that were actually the result of their own poor financial planning, and use guilt about their pride to manipulate me into continuing to enable their dysfunction. But the most illuminating development came when I checked the Jessica's Money Tree group chat, which I still had access to thanks to Marcus's technical skills. The messages from Sunday and Monday showed their true strategy and revealed just how little my emotional well-being mattered to them. She's having some kind of breakdown, Mom had written Sunday morning. We need to give her some space to calm down, then hit her with the family obligation stuff. She's always been susceptible to guilt about not being a good enough daughter. Dad had replied, maybe we pushed too hard. She's been getting weird about money lately. We might need to back off the requests for a while. Make her feel more appreciated. Or we could try a different approach, Ryan had suggested. What if we acted like we were doing fine without her help? Make her think we don't need the money anymore? She might start sending it again just to feel useful. Chloe had added. We could also try making her feel left out of family stuff. Like if she wants to be independent, she can be independent. But that means she doesn't get to be part of family decisions or celebrations. The clinical calculation in their messages was breathtaking. They weren't discussing how to repair our relationship or address the emotional damage that had been done. They were strategizing about how to manipulate me back into funding their lifestyle, with no consideration for my feelings or well-being. But the message that finally convinced me I had made the right decision came from Mom on Monday evening. If Jessica wants to act like she's not part of this family, maybe we should treat her like she's not part of this family. Cut her out of everything: holidays, birthdays, family news. Let her see what it feels like to actually be on her own. The threat revealed everything about how they saw family relationships. In their minds, family love was conditional on financial contributions. If I wasn't willing to fund their lifestyle, I didn't deserve to be included in family activities or celebrations. They had just confirmed what I had suspected for years, that my value to them was purely transactional, and that they were willing to use emotional manipulation and social isolation to maintain access to my bank account. By Tuesday, when none of their manipulation tactics had worked, they moved to their final strategy, enlisting extended family members to pressure me into resuming financial support. My phone rang Tuesday afternoon with a call from Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, who lived across the country and rarely spoke to our family except during holidays. "Jessica, honey, your mother called me crying yesterday. She's so upset about this fight you two had. Can you tell me what's going on?" I realized this was a fact-finding mission designed to gather information that could be used against me later, so I kept my response simple and factual. We had a disagreement about financial boundaries. I've decided to stop providing monetary support to them so they can develop financial independence. Oh, honey, but they're your family. Families help each other out. Your parents raised you, invested in your education, supported your dreams. Don't you think you owe them something in return? The conversation revealed that Mom had presented the situation as an ungrateful daughter abandoning her struggling parents, without mentioning the years of deception, manipulation, and emotional abuse. Aunt Linda was operating with incomplete information, making her pressure campaign ineffective but still hurtful. Similar calls came from other extended family members over the following days. Cousins, family, friends, even my high school guidance counselor, who had somehow been enlisted in their campaign. Each conversation followed the same pattern. They had been told I was being selfish and abandoning my family, and they were calling to encourage me to work things out and remember what's important. None of them had been told about the Jessica's Money Tree group chat, the systematic deception, or the years of emotional manipulation. They were operating with a narrative that painted me as the villain and my family as innocent victims of my sudden cruelty. But instead of wearing me down, the pressure campaign had the opposite effect. It showed me just how far my family was willing to go to restore their funding source, and how little they cared about the emotional damage they were causing in the process. They were willing to mobilize extended family, spread lies about our situation, and isolate me socially, all to manipulate me back into funding their lifestyle. It was the most comprehensive and coordinated manipulation campaign I had ever experienced, and it convinced me that cutting off their financial support had been not just the right decision, but the only decision that would break their cycle of exploitation. By the end of the week, I had reached a level of clarity about my family relationships that I had never experienced before. They had shown me exactly who they were and what they valued, and it had nothing to do with love, support, or genuine family connection. It was time to let them experience the natural consequences of their choices, without any safety net from the daughter they had systematically exploited for years. 3 months after I closed the Bank of Jessica, the true scope of their financial mismanagement became impossible to hide. The carefully constructed facade of middle-class stability crumbled spectacularly, revealing the reality of what happened when a family built their entire lifestyle around someone else's income. The first domino fell 6 weeks after I cut off funding. Ryan called me at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, his voice shaking with barely controlled panic that had nothing to do with family reconciliation and everything to do with personal crisis. "Jessica, I need your help. I'm in serious trouble." His voice carried none of his usual entitlement or casual manipulation, This was genuine desperation from someone who had finally hit rock bottom. What kind of trouble, Ryan?
I,
I owe money to some people. For trading. I used credit cards to fund my positions, thinking I could pay them back when the trades hit, but everything went wrong, and now I owe $23,000 across 4 different cards, and the minimum payments are more than I make at my new job.
New job.
That was interesting. Apparently, the end of his sister's funding had motivated him to find employment faster than 4 years of gentle encouragement ever had. What kind of job did you get? I'm working at GameStop. Part-time. It's not enough to cover the debt payments, let alone help with household expenses. The irony was perfect. After years of telling me that traditional employment was beneath him, that his day trading was a sophisticated career path that I just didn't understand, he was now working retail for minimum wage and drowning in credit card debt from his professional trading strategies. That sounds really stressful, Ryan. What are you planning to do about it? I was hoping... I know things have been weird between us, but could you maybe help me out one more time? I swear I'll pay you back. I've learned my lesson about the trading thing. The request was everything I had expected it to be. Focus solely on my money, with no acknowledgement of the emotional damage he had participated in, no genuine apology for years of deception, no recognition that our relationship had been fundamentally dishonest. Ryan, I'm not going to loan you money for credit card debt that you accumulated gambling with money I provided in the first place. It wasn't gambling, it was investing. Ryan, you borrowed money to make high-risk trades with no guarantee of return. That's gambling. And now you want me to pay for your gambling debts so you can continue living without consequences for your choices. Jessica, please. If you don't help me, I might have to declare bankruptcy. It'll ruin my credit forever. Then I guess you'll have to declare bankruptcy. That's what happens when you make financial decisions you can't afford. The silence on his end was long and heavy. Finally, he spoke again, and his voice carried a bitterness I had never heard from him before. I can't believe you're going to let your own brother's life fall apart over some stupid fight we had months ago. I'm not letting anything happen to you, Ryan. I'm letting you experience the natural consequences of your own choices. There's a difference. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. For years, I had been terrified that something terrible would happen to my family if I stopped supporting them financially. But Ryan's crisis wasn't the result of circumstances beyond his control. It was the predictable outcome of years of irresponsible financial behavior that I had been enabling. The second major consequence came 2 months later, when Dad called to inform me that they were losing the house. His voice was tight with anger and humiliation, and he made it clear that he held me responsible for their situation. Jessica, we got the foreclosure notice yesterday. The bank is going to take the house in 60 days unless we can come up with $14,000 in back payments. That's terrible, Dad. What are you planning to do? What are we planning to do? Jessica, this is your fault. We never missed a payment when you were helping out, and now we're going to be homeless because you decided to abandon your family. The accusation was breathtaking in its dishonesty. They hadn't been making their mortgage payments independently. I had been making them. When I stopped, they had simply not made arrangements for someone else to take over the payments. They had apparently assumed I would resume funding them before the consequences became serious. Dad, you had 3 months to figure out how to make mortgage payments without my help. What did you do during that time? We were trying to work things out. We thought you'd come to your senses before it got this bad. So, you didn't look for solutions. You just waited for me to resume paying your bills. Don't act like this isn't your fault, Jessica. You knew we were depending on that money. You knew what would happen if you stopped sending it. Yes, I did know what would happen. I knew you would have to take responsibility for your own housing costs like millions of other adults do every day. We're going to be homeless, Jessica. Your mother and I are going to be living in our car because our daughter decided that proving a point was more important than family. The emotional manipulation was so familiar I could have recited it from memory. But instead of guilt, I felt something closer to curiosity about what they had actually done with their time and energy since losing access to my financial support. Dad, have you looked for work? I'm 58 years old, Jessica. Nobody wants to hire a 58-year-old construction worker. Have you applied for jobs outside of construction? I'm not going to work at McDonald's at my age. Have you considered downsizing to an apartment you can afford? We're not going to live in some crappy apartment after raising 3 kids in this house. Have you talked to the bank about loan modification or payment plans? They want documentation of income we don't have. Every question I asked revealed the same pattern. They had options, but they considered all of those options beneath them or too difficult to pursue. Instead of adapting their expectations to their reality, they had simply waited for me to solve their problems the way I had for years. Dad, it sounds like you have several potential solutions available. The problem isn't that you don't have options, it's that you don't like your options. How can you be so cold about this? We're your parents, Jessica. We raised you, we loved you, we sacrificed for you. Doesn't that mean anything? It means I hope you find housing you can afford and work that provides you with dignity and purpose. But it doesn't mean I'm responsible for funding your lifestyle forever. The conversation ended with Dad hanging up on me, but not before delivering one final manipulation attempt. When we're homeless, Jessica, I want you to remember that you could have prevented this. But instead of guilt, his words gave me clarity. They were facing homelessness not because they lacked resources or opportunities, but because they refused to make the lifestyle adjustments that their actual income required. They would rather be homeless than live in an apartment, would rather be unemployed than work jobs they considered beneath them, would rather blame me than take responsibility for their own financial decisions. The third major development came from an unexpected source, Chloe's social media posts. Since she had blocked me from seeing her content directly, I learned about her situation through mutual friends who started reaching out with concern about our family's circumstances. Apparently, Chloe had been posting dramatic stories about her family's financial struggles, painting herself as the victim of circumstances beyond her control. But her posts also revealed information about her own situation that she probably hadn't intended to share publicly. It's so hard watching your parents lose everything, one post began. I'm doing everything I can to help, but working part-time at a boutique doesn't pay enough to support a whole family. I might have to move back in with my college roommate because I can't afford to help with rent anymore. The post was designed to generate sympathy and probably financial help from her social network, but it also revealed that she had been contributing absolutely nothing to household expenses despite living at home rent-free for 2 years after college. Another post was even more revealing, applied for 3 full-time jobs this week. It's crazy how competitive the job market is when you actually need to work instead of just wanting to work. Wish me luck. The casual admission that she had never actually needed to work before was stunning. For 24 years, she had been supported financially by her parents and then by her sister, never experiencing the reality that most adults face of needing employment to survive. But the most illuminating post came 6 weeks later. Got the job. Assistant manager at a marketing firm. It's not my dream job, but it pays $45,000 a year and has benefits. Funny how much you can accomplish when you don't have any other choice. The post confirmed something I had suspected for years. My family members weren't incapable of supporting themselves. They had simply never been forced to develop independence because I had been providing a safety net that made their choices consequence-free. Chloe's new job meant she could potentially contribute $1,200 to $1,500 monthly to household expenses if she chose to. Combined with whatever Dad could earn from part-time work and whatever Ryan might contribute from his retail job, they could potentially afford a modest apartment and basic living expenses. The problem wasn't that they couldn't survive without my financial support. It was that they couldn't maintain their preferred lifestyle without my financial support. And rather than adjusting their expectations to match their resources, they had chosen to blame me for their unwillingness to adapt. By the 6-month mark, the family dynamics had completely shifted. Ryan had indeed declared bankruptcy, but had kept his GameStop job and was slowly rebuilding his life without day trading fantasies. Dad had swallowed his pride and taken a part-time job at Home Depot, which he actually seemed to enjoy more than he was willing to admit. Chloe had discovered that she was actually quite good at marketing and was already being considered for a promotion. Mom was the holdout, still refusing to look for work and still calling me periodically with updates about their desperate situation and requests for emergency funds. But even she had been forced to adapt, learning to cook meals from scratch instead of ordering takeout, and discovering community resources like food banks and assistance programs she had never needed to know about before. The most surprising development was that they seemed happier. Not financially comfortable, certainly, but more grounded and realistic about their lives. The constant stress of maintaining a lifestyle they couldn't afford had been replaced by the satisfaction of earning their own way, even if their way was much more modest than what they had been accustomed to. It turned out that the Bank of Jessica hadn't just been enabling their financial dependence. It had been preventing them from discovering their own capabilities and developing genuine self-respect that comes from independence rather than entitlement. 1 year after I closed the Bank of Jessica, I received an unexpected phone call that would reshape everything I thought I knew about my family's capacity for growth and genuine change. It was Chloe, but her voice carried none of the desperation or manipulation I had come to expect from family communications. "Jess, I wanted to call and tell you something important. I got promoted to senior marketing coordinator today, and I'm making $52,000 a year now. I'm moving into my own apartment next month." The news was delivered with genuine pride rather than the usual undertone of accusation about how much easier my life was compared to theirs. For the first time in our adult relationship, Chloe was calling to share good news about her own achievements rather than to request financial assistance for her problems. "That's amazing, Chloe. Congratulations. How do you like the work?" "I actually love it. I'm good at it, too, which is weird because I never thought I was good at anything except spending money." She laughed, but it wasn't the bitter laugh I remembered from our childhood. "I keep thinking about how different things could have been if I had gotten a real job right after college instead of just waiting for life to happen to me." The conversation continued for 20 minutes, the longest non-crisis phone call we had ever had. Chloe told me about her work projects, her new apartment search, and her plans for building an emergency fund so she would never again be dependent on other people for her basic needs. But the most significant part of the conversation came near the end, when she addressed the elephant in the room without any prompting from me. "Jess, I need you to know that I understand now what we did to you. Not just the money stuff, but the way we treated you like your only value was what you could provide for us." I've been in therapy for a few months, trying to figure out why I felt so lost and useless when you stopped helping us, and I realized it wasn't just about the money. She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath before continuing. "We turned you into our parent, basically. Instead of learning how to take care of ourselves, we just transferred all our problems to you and then resented you for not solving them fast enough or cheerfully enough. It was fucked up, and I'm sorry." The apology was everything I had wanted to hear for years, but more importantly, it was accompanied by evidence of genuine change rather than just promises to do better in the future. "I appreciate that, Chloe. It means a lot to hear you say it. I also want you to know that I told Mom and Dad they need to apologize to you too, but really apologize. Not the fake apologizing they do when they want something. I told them that what they said about you being useless was horrible and that they're lucky you're willing to have any relationship with us at all after the way we treated you." This was perhaps the most shocking development of all. One of my siblings actively advocating for me with my parents instead of joining them in manipulation campaigns designed to restore their access to my money. How did they respond to that? Dad got defensive and started talking about how much they sacrificed for you growing up, but I shut that down. I told him that being a parent means taking care of your kids, not using your kids to take care of you. Mom cried a lot, but I think she's starting to understand how messed up the whole situation was. Over the following months, similar conversations happened with other family members. Ryan called to tell me he was dating someone seriously for the first time in years, and that having a real job had given him confidence he never had when he was dependent on family money. Dad called to tell me about a promotion he had received at Home Depot and how much he was enjoying mentoring younger employees. Even Mom eventually called, though her conversation was more difficult and took several attempts before we reached genuine communication. She struggled to acknowledge the emotional abuse aspect of what had happened, but she did admit that they had taken my support for granted and treated me unfairly. "I don't know how to undo the damage we did," she said during our most honest conversation. "I don't know how to prove to you that we can love you without needing your money. You don't have to prove anything, Mom. You just have to do it. Love me without needing anything from me. It's actually pretty simple."
I don't know how.
For so many years, our relationship was built around what you could provide for us. I don't know how to have a relationship with you that isn't about that. Then maybe we should start over. Get to know each other as adults instead of as parent and child, or as provider and dependents. The rebuilding process was slow and sometimes painful. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns of manipulation would resurface, conversations that ended badly because someone fell back into entitled expectations about my resources. But there were also genuine breakthroughs. Family dinners where no one asked me for money or made comments about my income. Phone calls where family members shared their own news instead of immediately steering the conversation toward their problems. Holiday gifts that were thoughtful rather than expensive, chosen because they reflected knowledge of my interests rather than attempts to maintain the appearance of reciprocal generosity. The most meaningful change came 18 months after I had closed the Bank of Jessica when I visited home for Dad's birthday. Instead of the tense, performative gatherings of the past, where everyone was on their best behavior while secretly strategizing about financial requests, the atmosphere was relaxed and genuinely affectionate. Ryan brought his girlfriend, who was delightfully unimpressed by family drama and treated me like a normal person rather than a walking bank account. Chloe had prepared most of the meal herself, proud of cooking skills she had developed since moving into her own apartment. Dad was genuinely happy, talking about work colleagues and weekend projects with an enthusiasm I hadn't seen from him in years. Mom was the most changed of all. She had finally gotten a job part-time at a local library and was taking community college classes in library science. She talked about her work with genuine interest and seemed to have found purpose and identity beyond her role as wife and mother. "I never realized how much I miss learning new things," she told me as we washed dishes together. "I spent so many years just waiting for things to happen, I guess. Waiting for Dad's business to improve, waiting for you kids to solve problems, waiting for life to get easier. I forgot that I could actually do things to make my own life better." The conversation was perhaps the most adult interaction we had ever had. She wasn't asking me to fix her problems or fund her dreams. She wasn't performing gratitude or manufacturing crises. She was just sharing her thoughts with another adult, the way healthy family relationships are supposed to work. But the real test of our family's transformation came when I announced that I was buying a house. A beautiful 3-bedroom home in Austin that represented everything I had been saving for while supporting their lifestyle. In the old dynamic, this news would have triggered immediate calculations about how my new expenses might affect their funding, suggestions about how I could use the extra space to help family, and hints about whether I might need financial assistance with the down payment that could be structured as loans I would never be expected to repay. Instead, I received genuine congratulations, offers to help with moving logistics, and excitement about visiting me in a space that was truly my own. No one asked about the purchase price, the mortgage payment, or what this might mean for my ability to help them financially in the future. 6 months later, they all came to visit my new home, not because they needed something from me, but because they wanted to celebrate my achievement and spend time together as a family. It was the first time in my adult life that I had hosted family members who were genuinely happy for my success rather than calculating how they might benefit from it. As I sit here today, sharing this story with all of you, I'm struck by how much our family has changed since I found the courage to close the Bank of Jessica. We're not perfect, and there are still moments when old patterns try to reassert themselves, but we're honest with each other in ways we never were before. The most surprising discovery was that my family members weren't fundamentally bad people. They were people who had been trapped in roles that prevented them from developing their own capabilities and self-worth. Ryan wasn't lazy. He had just never been forced to discover his own potential. Chloe wasn't irresponsible. She had just never had to face consequences that taught her responsibility. Mom and Dad weren't manipulative by nature. They had just developed manipulative strategies to avoid dealing with problems they felt incapable of solving. When I removed myself as their solution to every financial problem, they were forced to discover that they were capable of much more than they had ever given themselves credit for. And when they started solving their own problems, they developed genuine self-respect that made our relationships healthier and more authentic. The question I want to leave you with is this. Are there relationships in your life where you've become the solution to other people's problems in ways that prevent them from growing and developing their own capabilities? Have you ever found yourself being valued more for what you can provide than for who you are as a person? And here's the deeper question. When you finally set boundaries with people who were taking advantage of your generosity, did it destroy those relationships, or did it force them to become healthier and more honest? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their dysfunction and let them discover their own strength. I'd love to hear your stories about setting financial boundaries with family, dealing with relatives who saw you as a resource rather than a person, or discovering that people were capable of much more than they showed you when they were dependent on your help. Drop your experiences in the comments below. These stories help other people understand that they're not selfish for wanting to be valued for more than their usefulness. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family dynamics, financial boundaries, and the courage it takes to choose self-respect over people-pleasing. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar family financial manipulation. Sometimes knowing that others have successfully navigated these situations can make all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we can talk honestly about the complex realities of family relationships and personal boundaries. Remember that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being to fund their poor choices, and that sometimes the most generous thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's dependence. Don't forget to comment with your own boundary-setting experiences. Like this video if it helped you process your own family financial dynamics. Subscribe for more honest conversations about difficult family situations, and share the story with anyone who needs to hear that their financial resources don't determine their worth as a family member. Until next time, remember that you have the right to be valued for who you are, not just what you can provide, and that healthy relationships are based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than financial transactions. Sometimes closing your personal bank is the first step toward opening the door to authentic family relationships.